Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Rick and Morty Season 7, Episode 2 video. There were a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes, and careful for spoilers if you haven't seen the episode yet. Just starting at the beginning of the episode, working our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs, WTF moments, starting with the episode title, The Jarek Trap, which is a reference to The Parent Trap. It's meant to be another Rick and Jerry adventure where they both get their brains mixed up. They tend to do Rick and Jerry episodes at least once or twice per season since Season 3. This is mostly so they can have Jerry act more like Rick, like he can be a more badass version of Jerry instead of just the regular punching bag that he usually is. Usually one of the other tropes of Rick and Jerry episodes is them slowly growing like a little bit closer each time as friends. Like in this episode, Jerry full-on admits that Rick is like one of his best friends, or the closest thing to a best friend. They let Jerry be a little more badass like every once in a while, but usually they try to reset him back to being the family's punching bag. Like they don't want him to get too OP. Like in the opening scene, there's him going full Jean-Claude Van Damme. Every once in a while, he has a moment kind of like that. But then it's quickly back to loser Jerry. Probably the other biggest reveal of the episode, though, is that Morty has become a full-on drug dealer at some point, has this whole network of black market contacts, the world of crime, or the multiverse for some reason, or he's been doing it for Rick, and that's how he's gotten all these contacts. They just make it seem like in all of his scenes as part of that subplot, he's super dark, however long he's been doing this. They make it seem like it's been going on for a while, but it seems like it's been relatively recent.
Telling you, man, you're making a big mistake here.
Let me know in the comments, how long do you think that Morty has been dealing crystals? The cold open is Jerry trying to get Rick to help him get his rake back from Gene, who he thinks stole it because the whole idea is that Jerry's meant to be spineless. Love that Rick's first solution is just to give him the gun, like just go shoot him, go kill him, take the rake back that way. The only weird thing here though is that you find out there's a projectile gun later. Like normally you think that Rick would give him like a laser gun, like some sort of beam weapon. Projectile weapons are kind of beneath him. Then they set up the whole Freaky Friday premise of the episode with Jerry trying to shame Rick for being born a genius and Rick trying to explain that it's more of a nurture thing, not so much nature. Like you're not born a genius, you just work really, really hard to become even more intelligent. There's a lot of real-world science that you could use to argue for both different points, but in a lot of cases it is possible to be born with a higher potential for intellect, but in most cases, usually the nurture, like the environment you grow up in, makes up a lot of that difference. So there are a lot of potentially really intelligent people out there who are very young that just don't get the education that they need to become incredibly intelligent people. I also think Rick is kind of implying here, like he's making fun of Jerry, but also implying that Jerry could have become a genius had he studied hard enough when he was younger. And he's also making fun of Jerry for not being able to handle the rake situation on his own, because Gene is like an even bigger punching bag on the show. Like he's meant to be below Jerry in terms of like a level on the show. Notice when he's constructing the device to swap their minds Freaky Friday style, it's actually his suicide helmet that he winds up taking parts from and changing things. Like he's got two of them, so you can let me know who you think he was planning on using the second helmet for before he changed the device just to swap their minds. That's been in the garage since like Season 1. There have been so many theories about that since Season 1. What's he going to use it for? What's he cooking? Zoom and enhance, notice that the device is powered by the same type of crystals that Rick has Morty selling that they wind up snorting later in the episode. They're kind of like Klaxian crystals, but they're a different color, so they're not actually Klaxian crystals, like a totally different type of crystals. Like the other crystals also that help you see your future that are totally different as well. Now there are at least like 3 different types of really important crystals in the Rick and Morty multiverse. There are a couple points later in the episode too where Morty also jokes that you can use the crystals for multiple different things. Like, they're not just drugs, you can also use them for other things because Rick is using them to power his device here.
And does my son sell drugs for my father?
Maybe criminals will actually be honest with me.
Crystals can be anything, Mom.
Yeah, but these crystals are drugs.
Jerry willingly admits that he's unwilling to admit his own failures, like he'd rather go through this experiment than admit to his own failures because there are so many of them on the daily. They had the funny bit when they swap minds and Rick would rather kill himself than live with Jerry's mind, so he uses the gun that he tried to give to Jerry earlier. And because Jerry doesn't understand how to work Rick's body with all the Inspector Gadget of it all, he winds up accidentally killing himself too. One of the other weird parts of this bit too is that when the garage AI comes out and laments that it's going to lose its Thursday, like, oh, I had plans. What were the actual plans that it was going to have instead of putting their brains back together? Like, what was the garage AI going to do instead of doing this? I've already explained all the new intro scenes during my episode 1 video. None of them are featured during episode 1 or episode 2, so we'll see if they show up in future episodes. Morty gets captured for selling the space crystals on the Space Mafia's territory. No idea what Rick was going to do with all those space crystals, but he explains they were like 10 different briefcases worth that they had during the episode. So either he was going to go on like the world's biggest bender, or he was going to power something really, really big with it. This is the first time that we've been to this place, Crime Town. It just seems like a random black market center for the mafia. Like this is a mafia settlement because they have an open-air crime restaurant where everybody is a criminal. There's this whole running bit with the mob boss being afraid of Rick Sanchez. Like, what? He's Morty. He's related to Rick Sanchez. We have to let him go immediately. There are a couple weird bits that they give to the mob boss, too, like when he's yelling at everybody. Like, he yells at this one, calling him a big, precious moron. I think the idea is that he's either supposed to be super close to this person, or he thinks of him as close friend, or he's just a really nice mob boss. The character is voiced by Ryan Ridley, who also used to write on the Rick and Morty show in the early seasons, but he left to do other shows and just comes back to do voices every once in a while. There are a lot of people on Rick and Morty like that who, since come back to the show after leaving for a couple seasons. It's kind of the same thing with other really long-running shows like The Simpsons, where people will come on for a couple seasons, then they'll leave, then they'll come back many, many seasons later. When he calls Rick chaotic neutral, that's actually pretty accurate. Rick does both good and evil things in equal amounts. When he says Rick would turn him into a sandwich, that's just a reference back to Pickle Rick. It's like an example of the show referencing itself. Like Mr. Poopy Butthole broke the fifth wall, which is when the show literally references itself like an actual episode. You didn't watch season 4 referencing his previous episode.
Yes, you didn't see season 4, episode 3.
That's also something that a lot of long-running shows like The Simpsons do. They eventually get very, very self-referential, not just referencing things in real life, but actually referencing earlier moments on the show that you would have had to watch. Apparently, he also has 6 to-go bags, he's constantly ready to drop everything and go into hiding with a bag full of supplies. Weirdly, though, he knows all about Rick Sanchez and being from Earth, but he doesn't know what milkshakes are, even though he seems to know a lot about Earth. When the garage AI winds up putting their minds back together and mixes them up, turns them into hybrid versions of themselves, notice that Rick is drooling a little bit. There were a lot of people that asked about this during episode 1, about the lack of Rick's drooling. Early on, Dan and Justin, many, many seasons ago, actually explained this as a more practical animation kind of thing. They said after the first season, Rick drooled so much that they actually started to dial that back in animation just because they felt like it had become too big of a thing. But before they actually explained this practical change, fans actually came up with this theory that you were actually watching a different Rick. If you saw Rick in an episode and he wasn't drooling, then the episode was meant to follow a Rick from another dimension, not C-137 Rick. That could still be true, but I think it's more of a practical thing. They just want him to be drooling every single second of every single episode. And the reminder here is that the two hybrid different versions basically have equal amounts of each other's brains, even though they got slightly different pieces of each other's minds, which is why they both think of themselves as Rick, and both of them hate the idea of being thought of as Jerry.
I'm not stupid.
Oh, I beg to differ.
Screw you, half Jerry.
You're a half Jerry.
Half Jerry.
Generally, this is where we get into Star Trek territory with the Tuvix episode. If you didn't see Tuvix, they basically did this plot on Star Trek in a couple different Star Trek series. The whole idea is that they become completely new people with new personalities, new memories that they create for themselves, whole new lives. And in order to make things like they used to be, you essentially have to kill these two people. They just did this bit during Star Wars Lower Decks, which itself was meant to be a parody of an earlier Star Trek Voyager episode called Tuvix, where Tuvok and Neelix got mixed together and became a single person. The whole idea in the episode, and they parodied this during the Lower Decks episode, is that Janeway basically had to kill that new person to bring back her officers and make things the way they used to be.
Did Janeway figure it out?
No, she just murdered him. He begged her to live.
Janeway didn't mess around.
Jerry makes an R2-D2 reference. When he says R2-D2 Fritzing, that's just a joke about all the different times during the Star Wars movies when R2-D2 will seemingly not be able to do something or forget to tell them critical information when they need it. The whole idea is that R2-D2 remembers everything from the prequels, so he could have told Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan everything the minute that he met them, but he did not. There's a bit of a running gag about the mob boss having met Rick 10 times, but Rick doesn't care to remember him. That's pretty much true of all the people around the multiverse. Rick runs into all these different people through the course of his adventures and just does not care about them at all. They make a Liam Neeson Taken reference when Rick references telling the gangsters that they're supposed to tell them where they are, we know where you are, you don't have to tell us, we will find you. And Rick also kind of confirms that he tries to actively cultivate a mystique about himself around the multiverse, revealing that he does really care about how everyone thinks of him, despite telling everyone that he doesn't care what people think. The 1930s comedy act that he references is Laurel and Hardy. And when they crash through the mob boss's window, notice the art on his wall. This looks like a Han Solo Star Wars Carbonite reference. Like Jabba the Hutt, he's a crime boss, so he had something similar, like a person actually hung up on his wall. The person escaped, so now it's just the indentation that's left, kind of like Jabba's Carbonite. They make a whole bunch of gay jokes in the episode. There are a couple layers here too. So like first he's just calling Jerry gay to call him gay, but because they both acknowledge that they're the same, he's kind of slowly admitting that he's also kind of gay himself. I think the idea is Rick is just pansexual because he'll have sex with pretty much anything that moves, even robots. Then they turn it into like a much bigger idea, like everyone is a little gay joke, like sexuality is a spectrum. It winds up turning into like a much bigger Seinfeld kind of joke.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
I mean, it's fine if that's who you are.
Absolutely.
Rick makes it sound like them capturing Morty and botching whatever crystal deal he had Morty doing or what he was in the middle of cost Rick like 10 times what they're offering. So like I said, no idea what he was going to use all those crystals for. And because of Walter White's Crystal Blue during the Breaking Bad series, they make a Breaking Bad reference. The mid-tier crime dork is also a reference to the villains on the Breaking Bad show that Walter White and Jesse usually ran into. Rick refers to himself as a god. He's done this many times. He also fought God, aka Reggie, and killed him back in season 4. He was the closest thing to like the one true god in the Rick and Morty multiverse, but Rick is also an atheist and has previously said that there is no god. So it's just meant to be a joke about all the contradictions that reside inside Rick, like he himself is like a walking contradiction almost. They've kind of gotten into this in the Marvel movies now too, because they're like actual god characters walking around, but you also have characters in the Marvel universe who are atheists on like the Avengers and the other big teams. Like, how can you be an atheist, yet there is a walking, living god standing next to you here? They make a couple Coneheads jokes during the episodes, Rick having a Coneheads phase where he walked around having an actual Conehead. The Coneheads joke actually started out as an old SNL skit way back in the day, then they turned it into a movie, and they're mostly referencing the movie during the episode. It's also one of the rare examples of Rick and Jerry agreeing on something that they both mutually like. They both love Coneheads, and when they reference the cast of the movie being amazing, they're more complimenting the SNL actors because it was people from the SNL skit that did the movie, and Chris Parnell, the voice of Jerry, used to be on SNL. Probably one of the biggest things that he'd be known for from SNL was the Lazy Sunday skit. It was like one of the first big skits they posted online.
What up, Pawn? Yo, Sandberg, what's cracking? You thinking what I'm thinking? Party up, man.
They pay off the Conehead joke with Rick killing Chuxley, the mob boss, by running him in because pointy head, cone head, setting up the bit at the end of the episode with him dying from the wound. Then apparently they're both weirdly obsessed with cheeseburgers, but the bit about them wanting to make a super burger made up with all the different patties is an actual real thing. So like one of the very first jobs that I ever had when I was a little kid was working at McDonald's, and we actually did stuff like this. Like you take all the different types of meat patties and you make a super Big Mac, like a quarter pounder Big Mac. It was like 10,000 calories and it tasted amazing. They wind up naming their team up Burger and Fries for their love of cheeseburgers, and that's their whole bit, their calling card. They put cheeseburgers in people's mouths, which they also pay off at the end of the episode when the mob boss dies, like, how long have you been keeping this cheeseburger in your pocket there? The beer that they're drinking here too is Rick's usual brand. They've had it in many, many seasons up to this point. They make a few Matthew McConaughey jokes about taking it easy, just hanging loose. You could call that a joke on any of his movies. He's pretty much like that at some point in all of his movies.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
They learn Jerry was right about Gene stealing his rake, which he later admits to, and they give Gene this weird moment of self-actualization later in the episode where he comes clean about everything that's been bothering him for like the many, many seasons that he's been on the show. But then by the end of the episode, they turn him back into the punching bag, even though it's like the memory version of Gene. Like, we don't want Gene getting too big here, too powerful in the show. Don't want to pay him too many compliments. Rick's whole joke about the chat room and women calling him both their father and husband just implies that he's gone up with a ton of much younger women that think of him because he's so much older as their father, but also their lover. Then when Beth makes the joke about breakfast in school not really mattering, that's mostly them clowning on themselves because of the whole school. Like, there's this whole idea that Morty and Summer go to school every day. They're still in high school, so they have to go to school every day. But they actually referenced this way earlier on the show when Morty told Rick that he actually be held back a grade because Rick kept pulling him out of school. There's also a moment like this at the end of the episode too where Beth's like, I gotta go sew up some horses, like she has to go back to her job because Beth also has a normal day job that she goes to every day, even though they don't show it very often. Their whole Burger and Fries bit with the Hawaiian shirts and the crime spree feels like it's right out of like Scarface or some other movie like Pulp Fiction. You can let me know what you think this is a reference to. This kind of seems like a space version of Miami, so I was thinking Scarface. There's also Tony's Laundromat here for like Tony Montana. During their actual heist when they're stealing all the crystals, they play some synth music that sounds kind of like the music from Scarface. And apparently they've been doing this for a while, like it's a bit of a montage because they say that one of them keeps getting shot. Apparently it's been happening many, many times. They've got a weird spaceship houseboat. The Howard Dean scream that he references is to the politician in real life, Howard Dean, who actually screamed during a speech he was giving, and the speech he gave was called I Have a Scream, a big parody of Martin Luther's I Have a Dream speech. The robot looks kind of like a parody of Rosie the Robot from the Jetsons. Then Morty keeps dropping more references to his underworld contacts because apparently he's some huge person in the world of crime now. Don't know if that's going to continue to be a story runner this season or this is like a one-off bit for this particular episode. The swamp bit here is just a joke on airboat chases. There have been a ton in TV shows and movies. You can let me know if you think it's a reference to a specific movie. Then they turn themselves into like this Cronenberg combo creation creature that's supposed to be like the perfect being. It's also meant to pay off the title of the episode, the Jarek Trap, because they call themselves Jariki. And the idea is that they turn themselves into like this perfect creation. That's why they have sonic abilities. They can do pretty much anything. They can hear atoms splitting in space. RIP to all the mobsters, and then on their way back when Summer is clowning on podcasts being super lame, that feels like Dan Harmon making a Harmontown joke, like, oh, let's not listen to that. The crows she references is a callback to Rick and Two Crows from Rick and Morty Season 5, where he basically replaced the family with the two crows and just left Earth to go on adventures with them, which he's threatening to do now. When Gene has his big moment, he is correct, nobody in the family cares about him at all. Then the whole bit with the memory Rick stuck inside them that's trying to save their personalities I think is meant to be an Inception reference, like running around inside people's minds. When he says the memory of him is from 30 years ago, that's the time when he was still wandering around the galaxy when he first met Bird Person from all the flashbacks we saw in previous seasons. Then Rick orders Morty to go sell more crystals for him, confirming he was behind the big buy that Morty got caught doing earlier. Beth goes to operate on more horses. Like I said, they're just paying off the joke that she does have a regular day job that they never really address in a lot of the recent seasons. They zoom out, notice in the backyard they still have the graves from the beginning of Season 6, Episode 1. That was just the joke that the family had to move to another reality and replace the family that was already there again. That itself was just meant to be building on top of the previous similar types of bits that Rick had done. Like, we can only pack up and move to other realities a couple more times, Morty. Like, the joke will get boring after a couple more times. They end the Rick and Jerry episode with a scene of their picture as burger and fries at a bar they got kicked out of just to reference them being friends, basically. And the post-credit scene is just the memory Rick who's still stuck inside Jerry's mind now, also surmising that Rick actually stuck him or stranded him inside Jerry's mind when he fixed their minds. Maybe he remembers something that Rick doesn't want to get out. You can let me know in the comments, like, why would Rick strand him inside Jerry's mind? But the other joke here, too, is that Jerry, because he's so simple-minded, just thinks that all machines are made up of springs. So every time he opens up a machine, all that comes out is just a bunch of springs, which he's using to turn into sculptures having to live next to Memory Gene. When you start looking around the frame here, too, like all the different spring sculptures that he creates are basically recreating all the people in real life. But like this person, it seems like it's fighting an alien. These are a bunch of flowers. So there's a bunch of regular stuff mixed with really WTF stuff. There's so many Easter eggs and references in the episode, so if you think you spotted any that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments, and my full episode 3 video will post next week. Click here for my brand new Invincible Season 2 trailer video, new episodes for that really soon, and click here for my Rick and Morty Season 7 Episode 1 video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.